Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bronwyn Maddox, Director of Chatham House. Next year is 100 years of the Chatham House rule. You will be hearing a lot from us about this, but we are not under the Chatham House rule this morning. We have an excellent panel here to discuss this very broad question from soft power to hard reality, the great European rebalancing. And I'm going to take that as meaning what kind of hard decisions does Europe in the widest sense, what does it have to take now? But we have three people here with a particular interest in enlargement, and we're going to spend, I'm sure, some time on that. And we have a luxurious 50 minutes, I think, 5 minutes longer than usual, so to get deeply into this. I have a terrific group here, Marta Kos, European Commissioner for Enlargement, also Belgium, Mihai Popșoi, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs from Moldova, Ferit Hoxha, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs from Albania, Charles Michel, President of the European Council from 2019 to 2024, also Prime Minister of Belgium from 2014 to 2019, and Paolo Gentiloni, who's Commissioner of the Economy from 2019 to 2024, and Prime Minister of Italy, of course, from 2016 to 2018. I can't think of a better group, though it has enlarged since we first conceived of it in the direction of more strength on enlargement. So that will be, as I said, part of our discussion. Marta, perhaps I can start with you. And this question, this opening question of what decisions you think Europe now needs to take in this tough new world that we find ourselves in.
Indeed, it is tough, and geopolitics has changed a lot, but this has at the same time contributed to move enlargement on the higher level as a priority. And I'm happy that we have moved in the last year and a half more than in the last 15 years. And not just because I'm commissioner, I hope I contribute, but the geopolitics has changed, and the member states and also the European Commission see our enlargement process as one of the most important political processes we have for the time being. But back to your question. Generally, we have never been in the position that we have been squeezed from the East and from the West. And now we are looking for how to also to the outer world show more strength. This is not for me an easy task, because we used to live in the decades in the spirit that we shouldn't speak about our strength, that it is not good that we say how good we are. I think that we are very good in Europe, and we should act on this. What do I mean when I say we are good in Europe? One case of enlargement from the enlargement portfolio is Europe is attractive, and meaning that we should use this opportunity when enlargement is the priority. It is geopolitical as never before. We have to answer to the pressures from the East and from the West. So what I would like to see, and what I'm working on with my team, is that we get a political commitment from the member states that enlargement will happen. You know, I can do as much as possible on the field of the technical field of the accession process, but without the member states, as you know very well, we can't move forward. So what would help is a kind of Helsinki momentum in 2026. Helsinki, in 1991, there was a council conclusion that the member states have expressed their willingness to get new members in the European Union when they fulfill the criteria. And they have set the year 2002, and then the enlargement happened in 2004. So political commitment for what I'm working on.
So thank you very much for that. And you described Europe being squeezed from the West, the US, from the East. I assume you're referring to Russia, but of course there is the challenge even further east from China as well.
Indeed, but you know, for the first time, when I speak about the accession process, which is really much more than just the enlargement, we have adversaries from the outside who would like to see us fail. Never before somebody interfered in the accession process. We have now seen last year in Moldova. It is happening in other countries. So they are attacking our candidates with the main target as the European Union to weaken us.
Thank you for that. Paolo, let me come to you, and I'm interested in your take on this question of what Europe should now do under these pressures that Marta has described. There are, of course, lots of external pressures. Does concentrate the mind?
Yes. Well, indeed, we are in a completely new situation. I think first thing is to take note of this. One of the sentences that are showing this that I like is the famous sentence, "We can't be the only herbivores in a world of carnivores." This was repeated frequently. I think the copyright is Pascal Lamy, maybe 30 years ago. But now it is the reality. So what does this mean? It means how the European Union can address a situation where the ancient order doesn't exist anymore. Nostalgia is not a strategy. Of course, things can change in the US particularly, but not completely. They can be adjusted, but they will not go back to the previous decades. So first, the disruption of the world order, and second, the weaponization of the world economy. How do we address this? If you ask the hard decision to be taken, the first, in my view, is to contribute to the fact that Ukraine can win this war, meaning having a fair and just peace and stable peace. This is absolutely the main geopolitical priority for the EU, because it's existential for us. And of course, the follow-up of this is part, not only Ukraine, part of the enlargement process, what is the perspective for Ukraine, etc. And second, I would say, I think we need a big step further on also our capacity of economic response to this weaponization of the world economy, meaning trade. Good steps are there. We are not yet able to project these good steps in a global way, to have a real global role for the EU. But we are doing very good things. Second, and we are too slow, the famous Italian Prime Minister's reports, agenda, Draghi, Letta, etc. Andamento lento, slow at the moment. And third, I think, and here again, common defense could be a fundamental test. We need, again, to unite our strength for common funding of common European goods. It's crazy that we have now almost all the European central bankers in favor of a common safe assets, in favor of, from Germany to the Netherlands to almost all the central bankers in Europe, but the governments, I know very well the reasons, are reluctant. And this famous Hamiltonian moment that we lived with Charles 5 years ago, with the common funding after COVID, risks to be a parenthesis. We even are not planning a rollover of that debt, which is crazy. No single entity in the world would not consider a rollover of this kind of debt. So trade, common funding, and competitiveness, very good on trade, slow on competitiveness, and we'll see on common funding. It's an open issue.
You've given us a good recipe of how to be a carnivore, not a herbivore. Help Ukraine win, speed up on Draghi's reports, and do something about common defense. Thank you. Charles, may I go to you next?
No, thank you. I think that there are three priorities because of the global context. The first one, indeed, we have to strengthen our economies, and everything is on the table. And it's very regrettable, I think, that after the Draghi report, today, as we speak, only about 10% of the Draghi report is implemented. And it means that we need to act much faster. That's my first point. Let's strengthen our economic basis. It means also that we need more investments. And you were referring to the recovery plan and strategy post-COVID that we've put in place. I think that that's time for a true European sovereign fund in link with the capital markets union. These are two very powerful tools if we want to act faster.
Defense and capital markets union.
Yes, capital markets union together with a true European sovereign fund that can be linked to the European Investment Bank, in my opinion. Why? Because we need to invest. On top, I think we have a challenge in Europe. Why? Because we believe in a precautionary principle, but unfortunately, this principle is more and more abused, and it is becoming a zero-risk principle. And it means that it's more and more difficult to innovate within the European Union. I'll give you an example. In the field of AI, 60% of the investment are taking place in the United States, when less than 10% are taking place within the EU. That's a serious problem. First point, let's strengthen our economic basis. Second point, I don't want to elaborate too much. I agree with what was said by you, Paolo. Let's put in place a true European defense. If we want more influence, we have to be serious with true capabilities in that field. And my third point, yes, we have to support Ukraine faster. We have to support Ukraine much more, in my opinion. Why? Because today, Ukraine is our best ally. They are dying for our European project. They are dying for our European values. And that's difficult for me to understand why we're not able to do more for Ukraine, to bring more capabilities in support. If they are in a difficult position, we are in a difficult position. And finally, we need to build reliable partnerships, and we need to be lucid. Indeed, I think that today, double standards are a poison, and that undermine the European credibility and authority. And sometimes, let's be honest, I have the impression that there is a temptation to appease the United States, to appease Israel, and to be not far from being arrogant with the rest of the world. I think that we need a more serious and credible approach in the field of our international relationships.
I'll come on to that in a moment, but I'm interested, you broke out the capital markets and the defence. Out of all the things that Mario Draghi had in his report, do you see there being progress on those two things now?
Yes, I would like to also to be optimistic in that field. Why? Because there's a big difference between today...
And I'm pushing on this because I think you're right. No, this is a real chance.
There's a big difference between today and a few years ago. I remember 2-3 years ago, it was difficult to have a common opinion on the diagnosis, on the assessment. Today, there is this understanding, because it's very obvious what you're observing with the role played by the United States, the ambiguities regarding Russia, for instance, regarding Greenland, the differences between Europe and the United States in the Middle East. Now I have the impression that more than ever, we are on the same page. We understand that we need to be serious in that field. But there is still a gap. We need to make decisions. And what I think is the following. I am strongly convinced that the member states have a very important role to play. In the field of defense and security, they should be in the cockpit. They should make clear decisions. Let me give you a concrete example. If we want to make progress in the field of our defense industrial base, that's not possible without clear political decisions made by some of our member states. And I'm convinced that those with the tradition in the field of European defense, they have a special responsibility. By the way, in my opinion, that's not only about the EU, that's about the European continent. It means a collaboration with the United Kingdom, with Norway, with Turkey, with Ukraine, without any doubt. That's how I see this topic of European defense. And on top, I've proposed a certain time ago that we put in place what I call a European Security Council. I think we need a high-level political body for the European continent, with a special responsibility, I think, for the European Council, with two tasks. The first one is to react quickly and to coordinate quickly when needed, point one. And point two, to really to give an impetus in the field of our European defense industry and in the field of the European collaboration that are needed more than ever. Because in the future, we will invest more in defense, and it's good. But the risk is that we can be fragmented. We have to invest more and to be consistent.
Okay, thanks. Marta, you wanted to come in really briefly because I want to bring in Mihai next.
I just wanted to stress that what we have done in the European Commission in the last, let's say, 2 years on the field of defense is more than in the last 30 years. So it is already happening. Just one example, which tells a lot, you know, when our president has decided that she wants to have a commissioner for defense, many people laughed at her. Nobody asked this anymore, and we are having now enough money, a lot of money for investments together with the Ukraine. So we are moving very fast on this, but I agree with you, Charles, without the member states and their willingness to do this, we can't move on as quickly as it should be.
Okay. Thank you for that. Before we plunge into that, some more of that detail, Mihai, I would love your response to this first question of what you think are the most urgent questions and challenges, decisions facing Europe are?
Well, we don't have to go too far. We have the letter on the Draghi reports, which spell out in great detail what the challenges are. But what they don't seem to say out loud, and there seems to be some sort of taboo in Europe about the F word, federalism. Because we talked yesterday a lot about widening and deepening of the European Union. Widening is great, and I'm all in favor of widening, joining more countries, particularly Moldova. But until and unless we don't really deepen European institutions and we don't engage in having a banking union, a financial union, to have capital markets in Europe, there is now this decision to have the 28th regime to really help expedite the development of European IT sector, given that the whole European IT sector is smaller than Microsoft. And when you have these disparities in the single market, which is the crown jewel of the European Union, but if you talk to trade experts, they will tell you that the frictions within the single market, if you were to do away with those frictions, you would almost double the European GDP. But there seems to be this taboo about really going further, and there was this PTSD from the Constitutional Treaty, which is lingering to this day. But the question remains, what else do we need as Europeans when we have a war at the borders of Europe, a scale of which the continent has not seen since the Second World War, to really, truly, not only widen the EU, which I'm totally in favor of course, but also really deepen European institutions?
And so this is, again, takes us to the heart of another question of what kind of enlargement you would like to see. Obviously, Moldova is a candidate hoping for very early accession. And you're, it seems to be, making an argument that, you know, for deepening as well as broadening, that there should not be lots and lots of exemptions, that membership should be with all the obligations. Have I deduced that correctly from what you're saying?
Indeed, as a representative of the Moldovan people, I would like Moldova to be a member of the EU yesterday. But as a citizen and as a political scientist, I see value in the accession process being long for a reason. It is long because, you know, this beautiful hall that we are in, this stage, was built by Moldovan contractors from Moldovan diaspora. And building physical structures is tiresome. Building institutions is a lot more difficult and time-consuming. We are building institutions in the Republic of Moldova, not just because our European friends are nudging us in that direction, but because that is what Moldovan citizens expect of us, and that's what's been our commitment to Moldovan citizens in the past elections and the elections before. So the accession process is supposed to be long for a reason, so that the guardrails that are being built during this accession process don't unravel shortly after joining the European Union. We won't mention names, but we are working hard to make sure that we deliver at home on the reform process, on the benchmarks and all the domestic reforms, so that we are sure that our institutions are robust, so that we can be truly competitive, not just within the single market, but also our democratic political institutions are robust enough. But then again, I'm totally on board on having the accession process being merit-based for sure, but also to take into account the security considerations and what new member states bring to the security equation, but also to the economic equation. If we look at countries like Poland, transformational development since joining the European Union. Ireland, another amazing success story from what the country was before the accession. And this is true of every single country that joined. Not a single member state is worse off now than before accession.
You can mention names. Extreme politeness is not a condition for membership of the European Union. But I want to mention one name, which is Ukraine. So when you hear this debate about whether there should be exemptions for Ukraine to let it in early, what is your reaction as a representative of Moldova?
Well, if anybody deserves to be a member of the EU or NATO for that matter, it is Ukraine, given the enormous sacrifice and the blood that they shed every single day to defend Moldova, to defend all of us. But the European Union accession process, again, has a process, has a mechanism, and it's there for a reason. There's been this recent discussion about some sort of creative solutions for EU accession. It's a debate of how they can come about and what's the actual nitty-gritty of those proposals. From the standpoint of the Republic of Moldova, we want to be full-fledged members. And we worked hard to make sure that we have the same rights, we put in the same work as everybody else, and we want to make sure that the destination is the same for all of us.
Thank you. So, Ferit Hoxha, what do you, I would love your answer first to this question of what the hardest decisions facing Europe are, and then I would love your, which may not be the same answer, your response to the argument made for keeping the tests for accession very, very tight.
Well, for the first question, first of all, coming from outside of the EU, we normally do not talk about how the EU, what the EU should do. So usually we receive opinion, instructions and homework from the EU, and we're glad to have that. So I would have taken gladly the Chatham House rules. But let me join all the speakers, and of course, I mean, there is nothing new that I would say after everything that was said. There's, yes, of course, competitiveness, yes, innovation, yes, the role of the EU in the world, and yes, of course, Ukraine. I think that the outcome of the Ukraine war will be defining for Europe. What happens, how this war ends, and what are the consequences will really define a lot in how the EU will be enlarged or deepened, federal or what. So it's extremely important that the EU maintains this position, maintains support to Ukraine with all the other friends, including Albania, so that the just war of Ukraine really delivers results that the Ukrainians deserve. So for this, we have been and we are very, very clear. But I think I would like to see also, to give our opinion from outside the European Union, how we see Europe. I think in this world that is unpredictable, in this world that has put the rules aside, at least for now, in this world that is really disregarding everything that has been built in terms of international law for 7-8 decades, the European Union should stand its grounds, should really be how it is seen from its partners and friends around and the world as the most illustrious project that humanity has ever had, as the only way to make peace of warriors who spent thousands, hundreds of years to really deal with each other in the worst way, and then came up with the most fantastic idea, let's put everything together. So let's be only beneficiary of what we do together. And this is how we see Europe. And in these hard times, I think Europe is responding rather well. It's responding under pressure. But Europe has taught us many times that when it is in crisis, it really takes sometimes very good decisions. And I think Europe should continue to be, should continue to really build its image in Europe. Partnerships, as the defense and partnerships that I've built with our countries and other countries in the world, but should also take the space that is left for Europe in the world stage. Standard setting, of course, but also with competitiveness, easing the way how businesses work and how trade is done. So I think these are defining times and difficult times for Europe, but Europe has to stand its ground. It has to really improve one fundamental thing, which is the decision-making, the internal decision-making, so that it projects itself and its policy better in the world.
All right, so we've covered these three things really. Security, a lot of emphasis on Ukraine, on Russia, rightly, quite a bit on the economy and competitiveness, and this question of how Europe runs itself. I just want to do a tiny bit more on the enlargement and deeper question before we go to the US and China. And I'm going to come in about a long 10 minutes to audience questions, so people get your questions ready. Marta, just back on this enlargement question, and from the position of your own country, Slovenia, which is obviously acceded with the rules in full, absolutely as strict as Mihai is urging everyone to follow. What do you think we should make of all the talks about exemptions? I see the reports this week of perhaps exemptions for Iceland on fishing. What European countries should make of this, and what accession countries should make of all this talk?
I'm happy the discussion on how to go on with the enlargement methodology is now in full speed. The European Commission has offered some possible scenarios, and or perhaps one step back. We are still using the methodology for the enlargement, which was used plus minus 40 years back when Spain and Portugal entered the EU. So what we know from this debate with the member states, based on our suggestion, is that the majority of the member states would want to stick to the merit-based, what we have heard now from the candidates. And I think that this is the right approach, and the European Commission and me personally think this is good. Why? Our community is so precious that we cannot allow ourselves not to have the candidates best prepared when they entered. What the news might be is learned from the especially accession 2004, when my country Slovenia entered, is that we have to make sure that once we have new members on board, they will stick to the rules, even 5, 10, 15 years later. 3 days back, we have established, or the Council has established, the working party on the accession treaty for Montenegro. This is for the first time after, can you imagine, 17 years. And what we will see, this will be a new generation of the accession treaty, in the sense of how can we protect ourselves better, not to have my word, I was heavily criticized in November, now not anymore that much Trojan horses inside the European Union who would hamper our development or our decision making. Regarding methodology and the idea that Ukraine could get some speedy process, the red line is you only can become a member of the EU once you fulfill 100% of the reforms. But there are possibilities on the field of the gradual integration. And what we are now discussing with the member states is, can we enhance this gradual integration from the single market, where we are using this already quite successfully, like roaming, like SEPA, to other areas? Meaning, could we use the principle of involvement of the present third countries to the different policies of European Union? Meaning, we have third countries like Norway, Iceland, Switzerland being part of Schengen. They are participating at the Council without the decision-making possibility. So there are many, many possibilities, and this is how actually we could also approach Ukraine or any other candidates, meaning if they fulfill the conditions to be integrated in one area, it could also be security, we were speaking before, as a new area, then we could build this integration in the special field before, also with some rights, but generally sticking to the merit-based.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And we, it is happening really right day by day. as you said, these explorations, being watched very carefully in Britain. I think it is very likely that one or more of the parties of the left and centre-left will run on a platform of rejoining or applying to rejoin the EU in the next general election. That is obviously not to say that the EU says anything receptive in response. Let me go to a wider question, though, because we haven't really mentioned China or very much the US. And Paolo, I wanted your view of how Europe should respond to China now, and indeed to the US's new positioning. But I'm particularly interested in China, given the intense technological competition that is getting stronger by the month, even in the year and a bit since Mario Draghi wrote his report. The intensity of Chinese competition to European industries has grown. Pharmaceuticals being one of the next to get the heat of China. What should Europe do?
Well, we had different moments in our relation with China. At the end of the last century, we were among the enthusiasts, we Europeans, supporting China entering in the WTO, the close of the WTO for China, perfectly in line with the Clinton administration at the time. And then in this new century, year after year, we perceived the fact that China was not only a fantastic destination for our export, but was a very challenging competitor, not only because of the prices of their goods, but growingly because of the quality of their goods. And now China is the manufacturer of the world, the high quality, in some sectors, manufacturer of the world. What we did, we changed our mind. We had a peak of this good relation at the end of 2020 when the European Commission approved a comprehensive agreement on investment with China, but it was a strange thing. It was written procedure 30th December, so something that was in some way needed and asked, but never entered into force. It was freezed after this. And in the last 5 years, we had the same position of the Biden administration, so decoupling with a nuance from the European side. We call decoupling de-risking and not decoupling, but this was the... Now, in my view, of course, the Trump administration position is completely different from the Biden administration. We don't know what will happen in mid-May in the Xi Jinping Trump meeting. There is a lot of expectation of a G2 in China, a lot of interest on the fact that the two big guys will lead the world. And for us, the European, I think it's time to think to a potential reset of our economic relation with China. What does reset mean? Not, of course, compliance and openness, but selections of sectors where barriers are really needed because we are at risk of destroying our economy, but at the same time having positive conditions from China. Let me only give you an example. I think that Mark Carney had a nice agreement with China. Relations between Canada and China were much worse than European relations. Very tough, to the limit of the diplomatic rupture. But they agreed on sectors to be with tariffs and with barriers from Canada, and other sectors where China could invest in Canada, and rare minerals where good relations were possible. I have to say, frankly, openly, I'm no more in the Commission, that with the Biden administration, this would have been impossible. We were perfectly aligned to the consensus. Now I think it's quite possible, giving the message to the Chinese that we are not opening our markets, we are closing our markets in some sectors, but we are doing this in a transparent way with them, and we are asking in exchange in some way good relation on investments and rare minerals. I think there is a space for a reset from this point of view.
Charles, what do you think?
Look, I've engaged with the Chinese authorities a lot over the last decade. And what is the lesson learned, in my opinion? My opinion is the following. I think that over the last years, too many of us within the EU have accepted to be a bit instrumentalized by the United States in our relationship with China. And what I see is very simple. Of course, there is a fierce competition between China and the United States. And we know that in the United States, there's a bipartisan consensus about the importance to win this economic battle or political battle with China. I think that we should look at China and at this relationship based on its own merits, and we should identify what are our legitimate interests, what are our legitimate priorities, and we should engage with China. Without being naive, there are a lot of challenges, but there are also opportunities. And finally, if we do not engage with China, what we can see is very simple. There are only two options, this battle, China and the United States. First option, there is an incident and there is a big crisis. That's a possibility. If that's the case, all of us, including in Europe, we will face the consequences if it escalates between China and the United States. There's another option. There can be an agreement on some topics between China and the United States. If that's the case, I don't think that China or the United States will take care of our legitimate interests. And that's why it's not possible, in my view, to look at our relationship with China without having in mind our European sovereignty, our European strategic autonomy. And final element, final point, if I'm observing the state of play today within the EU, that's very simple. In fact, we've built this European project based on three acceptances. We have accepted to be dependent on fossil fuel, Russia. We've accepted to be dependent cheap manufactured products, China, and cheap security, NATO and the United States. That's the end of this model, and we need to address those challenges. We need to be smart, and again, I think that everything is on the table. We know what we have to do. Let's act, and let's act faster.
So thanks for that. And Mihai and Ferit, what do you think about this China-America, how the US, how Europe positions itself in relation to these two?
First of all, I would say that, well, in bilateral relations with China, for us it's very easy, it's very clear. We don't have investment, we don't have much trade, but that's easy. And in terms of really geopolitical positioning, we align with the European Union, so whatever the policies of the European Union are vis-a-vis China will be ours as well. But I think in a larger scheme, I join what President Gentiloni was saying, that the fine line between competitors and partners needs to be really defined, because there are both important elements. Because China, in terms of economic development, investment, doesn't play with the same rules as the European Union. So, of course, defining very clearly where China and the European Union are very competitors and they have to really protect their own interests, and where they are partners and they can really be mutually beneficial is very important. But it's important for the European Union, and of course, directly for us as well, so that the European Union doesn't become a victim of a competition, or whatever the word be, maybe a confrontation between the US and China.
Well, it's safe to say that we've entered for quite some time in an era of fierce geopolitical competition. For us, our key strategic ally and our key strategic goal is to join the European Union. But the United States has been historically a very close partner for the Republic of Moldova. We have a strategic dialogue with the United States. They've provided us enormous support with our energy security, with security broadly speaking. So we are keenly aware of this competition. But at the same time, when it comes to China, our trade imbalance, you would not be surprised, is astronomical. And as President Trump would say, we don't really have a lot of very strong cards. So we have to use all the might of Moldovan diplomacy to try our best to at least even in the slightest bit this trade imbalance, because this is clearly in the national interest of the Republic of Moldova and our businesses. When it comes to the global competition, and I can speak also not just as a Moldovan citizen, but also as a citizen of Romania, therefore of the European Union, the best way to be truly relevant is to be able to defend your crown jewel, the single market, with a security arm. If you are going to be taken seriously, you have to be able to project power. I think we remember back in the day when the Pope in Rome was wagging the finger to Stalin, and Stalin asked, how many divisions does the Pope have? In the current environment, the European Union has enormous potential, economic potential, but it's not reflected in geopolitical and military potential. So in order to be truly relevant in this competition, that cannot be neglected.
Thank you for that. Let's squeeze in just, we have 8 minutes for questions from the audience. Would anyone like to start us off? Right, I have one perfectly behind me, and I'm going to take 2 at a time. You could say who you are, that is great.
Hi, I'm Dionysis. I represent a company which was born in Greece, but it's very European and global, active in defense and security technology. We have lots of amazing comments, and thanks for boosting again our confidence in the European project. We talked about Trojan horses, but also about how Europe should hold its line and becoming even more decisive on defense. And my question is, how do we strike the right balance between aligning the European project and the European voices while leveraging the country-specific agreements and historical ties that some member states have with other parts of the world? And also, how do we take timely and decisive decisions for the benefit of the European citizens and with reasonable budget allocation, especially focusing on defense?
Okay, thanks for that good pair of questions. There's another one over here. Let's take these 2 together.
Thank you. My name is Kate Bolingero, and I'm from MLEX. I just have a bit of a sort of something that I wanted to ask about, because I've noticed that a lot of the conversations I've heard here today have focused a lot about on might is right. But arguably, Europe has probably the strongest potential for soft power in the whole world, with the cultures that are here, the languages, all of this rich history that is in this continent. And my question would be, in a world where we are saying that might is right, is there not a strategic advantage in actually leaning into that soft power? I understand the defense considerations, of course, and obviously, but thinking about economic power, but also that attraction that soft power can bring, is this not something that should also be part of the conversation, as opposed to just how many bombs can I pay for?
Thank you very much indeed for that very interesting question. And given the title, From Soft Power to Hard Choices, we had not addressed it, but I'm really glad that you have. Marta, would you like to kick us off? We had a pair of questions on striking the right balance, particularly for those who have relationships with other parts of the world, and then on a particular question about defense, and then on soft power.
Yes, we are very good aware that some countries have these historical ties, but we live in the times of where the big powers are going away from the rule of law, also international rule of law. So to some extent, of course, we understand from some point on, everybody who wants to join the EU has to align with our security and foreign policy. This is the process we know. Meaning, where there is no compromise, it is our values, our rule of law. And this is, I would go back to the soft power you have asked. Indeed, we see what now our adversaries are using as a fake news, that every country which would love to join the EU will lose the identity. One of the narratives, especially from Russia, from Russia's side, from the West we get that we don't have identity at all. To some extent, I'm exaggerating a bit. So, the soft power Europe is having is for sure our diversity, It is, you know, living in diversity of the languages, of the cultures, of different mentalities we have, but also of the values. You know, Article 2 of the European Treaty are kind of, for me, the Bible of everything what we do is so much important. And you know, when we hear from the West that Europe is in a decline, and at the same time we get more and more candidates like Iceland now, you know, it is the opposite. The attractiveness of the EU is higher. Why are we capable to make more and more FTAs? Because of our attractiveness, because of the common market. And I think that we should cherish this more and speak more about it, what makes us unique. Perhaps we will stay or remain the only island of values in the world. Generally, you know, this different, how do we treat the countries which have their relations? It is finding a solution in a dialogue with all the member states. Some of them have best relations with some of the others. But going back to your first question, you know, of course, every member state has its own interest. We should consider this. But we should also consider what is our European advantage in the sense of working on this.
Okay, so everyone gets about 30 seconds each. Now we're up against the time, and I'd like to pull out that question of what Europe's advantage is.
Yeah. History of Europe and history of the world is full of might is right. We have seen that in the past. Those might imposes decisions, doesn't find solutions. And we know that, and history has shown that those imposed solutions are not long-lasting. There comes a time that they are put into question, and there comes a time that other solutions are found. What European Union, that soft power has been doing for the 70 last years, has shown resilience, continuity, and we like that, and we love that, and we choose that, and that's why we want to become part of the European Union.
Okay, Paolo, soft power, does that make us a herbivore, not a carnivore?
Well, I think we would be crazy if, in strengthening our autonomy and projecting our power, we would plan to lose what we are. So the European model, meaning the welfare state, the diversity among countries, the rule of law, our culture, our longevity. For my age is very important that you have a life expectancy very long. This is something that we have to be proud of and project power on this basis. If we project power and we lose our model, we are crazy.
Okay. Mihai.
Well, soft power is great, and we lean hard on soft power in the Republic of Moldova because hard power is a bit difficult. But you need to soft power only works effectively if you have a big stick. Yes, speak softly and carry a big stick, Teddy Roosevelt's famous quote. But at the same time, we need to be aware this militarization that is happening now in the world can be, and doesn't necessarily have to be, but it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you don't have to be an oracle to know that if everybody is investing heavily in military equipment, then chances are that military equipment is going to be used. So to avoid that from happening, soft power is important, building trust is important, multilateralism is important. So that's why even in this fierce geopolitical competition, diplomacy will have a central role, and the more engaged we are, the more we speak to each other, the less chances that these investments that we should make as a deterrence in defense will actually be used for offensive purposes.
Charles, you have 20 seconds.
I feel that the success of this EU priority is based on multilateralism, rules-based order, international law, point one. And if today we give the impression in some cases that we are a bit ambiguous when some of our friends or those who are supposed to be our friends are not in line with those principles, then we lose our credibility and we lose our soft power.
Thank you, and we're up against the hard deadline, the big stick of the clock, and we have made it to the second. Please join me in thanking this terrific panel.